Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. In our show today, we are going to take a look at AI and how it's redefining sales. I'm joined today by Rob Ciampa, the CEO and founder of Business Catalytics. Welcome, Rob.
Michael, it's great to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great. I love that was able to get you on this show. I know a couple of weeks ago you were on the In the Hot Seat show, which was a lot of fun, and we talked a lot about AI and SDRs. And today we're going to open the lens up a bit more and jump right in. So maybe you start by just doing a quick intro, and then tell us a little bit about Business Catalytics and what you're up to.
Yeah, from an intro perspective, first of all, I think our call today is timely for those of us who've worked in sales over the years. Let's face it, it wasn't that fun. We tried doing things better. We tried making stuff efficient, and it was all incremental benefit. And these days, what we're seeing is game changing, which is good and bad. And we'll cover all that. But my path here is I had been involved in a lot of companies from small startups to Fortune 500s. I've done a lot of turnarounds, and I've headed sales organizations. I've headed marketing organizations. I've run companies. But for me, it was always the connections. When I saw great products fail, or I saw great sales leaders fail, or companies that didn't achieve their growth objectives, I said, we got to look at this differently. So I had done modeling of organizations over the years, and that was sort of the genesis of Business Catalytics. How can we model an organization and then diagnose it to determine, what's hampering the growth? And so that was the foundation. And about 2 years ago, we took all these models that we had and we started developing AI models specifically to diagnose organizations. And our goal is, let's find out the root cause of things, and let's find out what the real problems are and solve them, which is kind of an undertone for today's call, because oftentimes we're going to be talking about sales. And when a company misses its revenue number, oftentimes the first thing you do is shoot the VP of sales, which is not the right thing to do. So my goal with Business Catalytics is, let's diagnose companies, let's get to the core problems, let's look at the solution set, and let's turn to providers who can actually fix the problem. So it's an exciting business to be in. There's a lot of companies that, are kind of blind to what's actually happening, or what's stopping them from growing, or what's causing their problems. So, and by the way, maybe the segue for you is, AI isn't a panacea either. So if you get a problem in this area and you can apply AI to this area, you may actually make your problem worse.
Yeah, well, and I know one of the things that I've talked to a lot to different folks about as we've kind of gone more and more into agentic AI and all the other tools that have kind of grown up over the last 2 years, is the fact that all of us who've worked in customer experience and worked around CRM for years knows that the data in the Salesforce automation part of your CRM system, it's not good.
You think?
Yeah. And if you're trying to do AI and you have bad data, yeah, it's still just bad. So.
I think many of us have tried to fund a project either as a head of marketing or head of sales to clean up our, and I don't want to, pick on Salesforce, but it's the lingua franca of CRM, right? Yeah. It's we've all said, hey, we got to clean this up. We're going to do amazing things. And I probably put in 10 proposals to my CEOs to get that funded. Not one has ever been approved. Why do we want to clean it up? So what happens is it just keeps on getting dirtier and dirtier and dirtier.
Yeah, I was at a Salesforce event last week talking to them a lot. And one of the things that, one of the feedback that I've given them this for years, but especially now that they're so deeply invested in AI and agentic AI, is that, you did Data Cloud a few years ago. That's a great move. That was the right move for the foundation for what they need to do now. But now you need to focus on the agents that actually manage QA and tie together all the data across your business. And that's the piece that they haven't talked about it a lot. I mean, I know they're doing some things there, but to me, that's the number one use case right now with agents, is to get down inside the data and let's fix this once and for all.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, because one of the things that I'm seeing in my work and working with organizations is there was a bit of a hesitance to sort of jump in. it's kind of saying, I'm not going to buy new clothes until I lose 30 pounds. I'm not going to do this new sales stuff until this new automation or whatever you're going to call it, until I get my data clean. That's the beauty of is we start looking at AI. AI can start not necessarily cleaning up. It can do some cleaning, sure, but identify the patterns and pick out the data that's going to be relevant as we start making our future sales decisions and I would say activities around that.
Yeah, I did a episode with one of the co-founders of a company called 180 Ops a few weeks ago, and they're doing a lot for AI and RevOps, and they've really focused around not just prescriptive types of analytics, but going all the way, from predictive to prescriptive, that you can really start to see a action plan that's individualized as you're going through this. So there's an interesting conversation.
Oh, that's
a lot of
terrific.
stuff there.
I think that's a great application.
Yeah.
But as I look at organizations, it has to be balanced across the organization. What I'm seeing for a lot of companies, they're doing this in silos. Sure, there's the marketing silo for some AI stuff, and now we're starting to see it in various silos of sales. It could be, as we talked about previously, within like the BDR spectrum, but it's how do we interconnect the silos? Because ultimately, the true operational performance is going to be tied to how all these work together, and that's the challenge that we have in front of us.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, why don't we start by focusing a little bit on the funnel and how the use of AI has really transformed traditional sales funnels, and then just kind of talk a little bit about where you see the most significant improvements across that funnel.
Michael, I'm concerned that this show is not going to be for young audiences because you use the F word. Okay, the F word, the funnel word, and talk about a hot button. So as much as people say AI is going to kill the funnel's dead. The funnel's not going anywhere. Okay, but we've just done a marvelous job screwing up the funnel and bastardizing it over the years. So when we look at the then we'll talk top of funnel, we'll talk mid funnel, and we'll talk bottom of the funnel. But oftentimes when we have our funnel discussions, we forget that stuff comes out of the funnel, and we also have to address those issues as well. So from the top of funnel, we're seeing AI, sure, AI to determine, are there interesting organizations that will fit our profile. And then, with marketing, and again, marketing automation over the years, how do we get these folks? And once they're in there, what do we do? But I'm seeing less. I mean, I see some activity at top of funnel for sure, but I'm seeing a lot more activity with mid funnel. Okay. So once the prospect engages, and what we may do is we may apply the AI process specifically to some of the top of funnel activities so we can get the real qualified leads, the ones that fit our ideal customer profile, into the hands of the right salespeople. If it's a BDR or it's going to be an actual account exec. So once that occurs, that's where the magic occurs. Is when can we start? We can start looking at engagement, because at mid funnel we're engaging. And here's where the power of AI, starts really shining. There's tools out there like Gong, et cetera. We're looking at our conversation, we're looking at our communication, we're gauging the customer reaction, and we're also beginning to start possibly doing some personalization. And this is one of the things that we really have to think about. So suddenly we're getting better insight into what's happening at this particular, and this could be revolutionary. And one of the things I see fail oftentimes, with my clients, is mid funnel. When things fall out, we start looking, and we've looked at a lot of conversations. Suddenly it's like, did you not hear what the prospect was saying? Were you not listening? And so what people don't realize is suddenly we have, if we look at the underlying, let's talk about the human factor for a second. We basically have a shortage of emotional intelligence sometimes when we see sales performance. And so I'm going to state this, is there's a way for AI to basically improve EI. It's your feedback loop. It's your grandmother slapping you on the head when you say something
Mhm.
stupid. And so, and I'm not trying to trivialize this because this is a
No,
big
no,
deal.
it's important.
Yet we still have the
Yeah.
human factor. So using, again, mid-funnel AI to also help drive EI. So let's get down to the bottom of the funnel, okay? And this is where this is where we start saying, oh, we can forecast better and everything else. We're at the bottom. The likelihood is there. Bullshit. Okay. We've seen bottom of the funnels, well, the deal fell out and everything else. Let's talk about AI for a second. Are there flags, that are raising? Companies like Clary can tell us if deals are at risk. And
Right.
again, these systems will tie into other systems, but we're looking at the risk of specific deals at this stage, and much better insight. And AI can also flag and help filter, sales reps that are potentially hiding stuff in the bottom of the funnel so they don't get beat on the head
Yeah.
versus what's reality. So it also plays a role not only with the seller, but also with sales management. And it's going to also look at the once you're at the bottom, you're looking at deal structuring, et cetera. Again, this is where AI can help. Also
Mhm.
proposals and things like that. We may talk about that later as well. So suddenly there's an impact there. But I don't want to stop at the bottom of the funnel, Michael, if it's okay, because
Mhm.
suddenly once the deal is out, it's done, it's implemented. We have a whole new, we're talking about selling. Selling doesn't stop at the bottom of the funnel
Yeah.
once it's closed won.
Yep.
Okay. And the other challenge that we have is what's going to happen there? Can we keep this customer?
Right.
Okay. Are they happy? What does it look like? Retention becomes really, really important. And so there's going to be tools, and AI is going to have a big role there, which we can talk about, later. But it's the entire life cycle. It's the journey, and it matters a lot. It's going to give us better insights.
Yeah. One of the things you said there, I for years, I admit I've given the marketing folks a hard time about that journey map thing, because the last time I checked, no customer ever followed your map. And I think it's interesting now because you do have the capability. I like to actually go beyond personalization and talk about individualization. So rather than segments, I can talk about people, individuals, and I can start to build dynamic maps that react to whatever behaviors you see, whatever you observe, online, offline, whatever it might be. To me, that's exciting. I think that's one of the better use cases that I've seen.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. And how often we've laid out the journey map,
Mm.
which is different from, we try to equate the journey map with the funnel progression.
Mhm.
It just never really blends very well. And the journey map, and oftentimes the journey map may be done by the marketing organization, which may not be as tight with the sales organization. The sales organization regards the journey map as but suddenly with the tools and the insights, we're saying, okay, what were the decision points? What were they looking at? What came up? So suddenly the journey becomes the journeys, because I think your point is
Yeah,
absolutely spot
yeah,
on. What does the journey look like? And remember, it's not just mapping out a journey, it's learning about these journeys as well. So all of a sudden, for a prospect 6 months down the road, we may recognize, Joe or Josephine, looks like they may be going on this journey. So I have a better path to
mm,
possibly winning them.
yeah, yeah. That's good. I think as I've looked at this, I think the idea that this whole concept of map has led us down this idea of a linear path, right? And even the funnel kind of makes people think that too, right? You go through a funnel, you don't actually go down to the middle and go back to the top and back down, right? But unfortunately, prospects do, and they do that all the time, right? So you've got to be able to adapt in a real-time environment versus trying to force a prospect into a path that you think they should follow, because they're not
Uh,
gonna.
yeah, I think that's spot on.
Mm.
Suddenly, AI gives us the adaptability because we can say we were living in a very, very structured, rigid world that led us to lose more deals than win deals.
Yeah,
And suddenly with the right AI, and we'll talk about that later, with the right
yeah,
AI, suddenly we have the flexibility, the ability to adapt, and the ability to step into areas where there
mhm,
isn't a chartered course to address that. So
yeah.
this is a big opportunity.
Well, and with that in mind, I'm curious what you've seen, because you've certainly worked with a lot of sales teams implementing and using AI tools. Where do you see the biggest return on investment for those tools? And how are they actually implementing and making that usable and accessible to their sales team?
Oh, great question. I think first and foremost, and there's a couple, if we have our own heat map of AI and sales, two areas pop out immediately. And then there are other areas, but they're just not as hot. So what I'm seeing initially is organizations that are doing it well are addressing the efficiency game to start.
Mm.
In the efficiency game, if they're structured such that they have an inside sales organization, and many do,
Mm.
what they'll do is they want to get rid of the mundane activities. You can actually have terrific interaction initially with a prospect, via the AI tools. You look at companies like Sixth Sense, they've got some great tools there.
Yeah.
So the ability to get rid of all this wasteful stuff that could be, and I'll argue, potentially more effective than the first phases of the BDR. Okay. And we're not talking, I am not advocating, the BDRs, whether, they're BDRs, SDRs, take your XDRs, whatever you want to call them, inside, inbound, outbound. The reality is a lot of the upfront stuff is mundane.
Mhm.
A lot of the inside salespeople hate it, so they don't do it well. And
Yeah.
so suddenly you've got fall off there. So potentially terrific prospects that just aren't getting service. So that
Right.
goes away. And so that's the first area, where there's going to be a distinct ROI, because what you're going to see is you can see better conversion rates. You're going to see better response rates. And so when the BDR or the inside salesperson is ready to engage, then suddenly it's a much better conversation. There's a lot more insight. So that's, heat map area one, where, I think it's manageable. And I am not going to advocate, hey, let's upset our whole organization. We're going to do AI for sales everywhere. Yeah, that would be a disaster. So for those of you listeners who are part of a startup company and you have your board meeting and some board member says, oh yeah, one of my portfolio companies did all of this. You gotta figure out what's going to be right for you. Just don't fall in that. So the second area of the heat map, let's talk about the unsung heroes in sales. Sales ops. Okay. So remember, we all have seen the movie where, the ugly duckling in high school, the geek that nobody wants to ask on a date, doesn't get the attention, but he or she does their work. And then suddenly years later, they're the bow with the bell of the ball. Okay. Yep. That's sales ops. For you sales ops guys listening and gals listening, stay tuned. This is going to be a big deal. So sales ops basically had a shovel, do all this manual stuff because as a way to make our salespeople more efficient. Because let's face it, Michael, you talked about Salesforce.com. Okay, you want to update a contact record in Salesforce.com or an opportunity field here. It sucks. And so the sales ops folks had to do that.
Yeah.
So suddenly with sales ops, what they're looking for is they're going to be looking for they're going to be the pattern matchers. And so where I see organizations, I don't see many organizations doing this yet, but the ones who are suddenly, our sales ops folks have the full picture. They're seeing all the connection points. We talked about the journey earlier. What does the model look like? So suddenly these sales ops folks are going to be going from tactical, let's put this crap in, to suddenly they're mapping the stuff out, and they're going to be the analytics folks, gleaning the insights. Yep. And this is what people are forgetting. So we're seeing sales ops potentially going from, just tactical to extremely, extremely strategic. And I think this is a really big move for organizations that do that.
Yeah, I mean, that ties right into my statement about predictive and prescriptive, right? That sales ops teams that have the capability to start to predict outcomes and guide sales teams towards those opportunities that do have truly the greatest chance of success. That's, talking about a focus. And, using time effectively. I mean, to me, that's amazing. And by the way, one of the things I saw last week at Salesforce was they have agents that can go do some of that stuff for you now. So
Yeah, it's gonna be, it's gonna be interesting by the day.
yeah, it will. Well, it has been for the last 2.5 years. So I'm curious though, one area that a lot of people kind of talk about when we talk about AI and sales and, this kind of where's the human touch in this? And obviously building relationships is, what sales does in at least in the B2B world. So, how are sales leaders balancing this? How do you balance automation with AI and this human touch that you need to build that relationship?
So I think there's a question behind the question as well. It's, where's the dividing line between, is there a dividing line? The answer is yes. And I think sales leaders right now don't, a lot of sales leaders don't necessarily understand where that boundary line is. What we just talked about, on the BDR side is going to be one thing. But I think what they're failing to see is, what do we need to do with our particular teams? And how do we organize our teams to take advantage of this so we know where the handoff is? So that's going to be critically important. So let's talk about a way that organizations can do that. So suddenly they have to recognize, one, they have to understand their sales structure or what's worked historically.
Yeah.
And is it a complex sale? Okay, a lot of touch points. What does this mean? So what sales leaders have to understand is, what does this look like? Because at the end of the day, your more sophisticated sales are always going to require a human element.
Yeah.
Okay. Until AI systems can drink martinis, okay, we're going to be, there's a human element, and that becomes key. However, let's not forget that it isn't necessarily the line is drawn. So once AI is done, your traditional sales kicks in. So we got to think also of AI. It's a continuum. So a lot of it could be automated and only done by them. But once the handover is there, AI suddenly becomes basically the mentor, the coach. As we talked earlier, analyzing conversations, analyzing emails, helping true sales professionals perform better. Let's think about this. I want to reach out to XYZ. What's the best channel to reach that person now that he's engaged? What type of information should I send, would he think? Okay. And what's the best time to do this? So oftentimes the big picture, is not really visible, to salespeople. They're very, very efficient. They're gonna basically get stuff out of their heads, but it's going to make them better. And at the same time, it's going to challenge them. It's like, have you thought about this? Did you probe this? What about this? And give them, make them, far more savvy about, what they're doing. And then when we get closer to the deal, it's like, how should we structure this deal? That can be an automated activity. Okay. Generating the contract, which everybody hates, unless the number's really, really big, and then you kind of have fun. But these are where it comes into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this capability to move from AI taking actions, but then AI moving to the side, but supporting, I think is really important. And the fact that, you can have sentiment analysis in a meeting in real time. I mean, some things like that are incredible at understanding timing and desire and effectiveness, all these things that, we talk about coaching, and we're really changing coaching to a real-time activity, which is, to me, the much more effective way than we've tried to do in the past.
Well, Michael, let's think about this. You and I know a lot of sales leaders, okay, either at the executive level or further down with sales teams. I'm going to ask you a question. What percentage do you think are good coaches?
I'd say it's pretty low.
Yeah.
Probably in the less than 20% range.
Yeah, exactly. Remember the guy who's sitting in the seat up above, he or she was good enough to hit their quota over the years, so they get bumped up to a sales leadership role. It doesn't mean they're a good coach. It doesn't mean they're a good mentor. And this is really the key to to effective feedback and operations. You can beat so and so over the head because they haven't hit their quota, but at the end of the day, it's like you're the sales leader. If they're not hitting their quota, you can say they're awful, but what insights do you have? What did they need? Why did you hire them? Do they fit the profile? And this is a big deal. There's a whole lot more to talk about in this whole area of getting our sales teams trained in the future.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of opportunity to leverage technology to help in that too,
Yeah.
which I think is exciting. So you mentioned quota. I'm curious about other metrics though, because I guess kind of two sides to this. One of the things I've seen over the last 15 years or so with the explosion of sales tech tools is a focus on traditional metrics. And even when things aren't working, we continue to focus on traditional metrics. So, if 100 cold calls doesn't work, 1,000 probably will, and it will for a while. So I'm curious, how does this, what data points, what metrics are now viable that maybe weren't before we were using AI, and how can we kind of prioritize them to help the team perform better?
Oh, well, I got one poster child, which has been the bane of my existence. There's actually two. One big one and its cousin. I hated lead scoring. All right. And I got in, there's a head of a marketing automation company that came to Boston one time. He's got all these customers raving on stage. Oh, this is great. We do lead scoring. And I raised my hand. I said, can I ask a question? Sure. I said, tell me the correlation between lead score and closed won rates.
Yeah.
The entire stage, they were deers in the headlights. Okay.
Love it.
It's like, why? Because lead scoring historically has been much like it was a static thing.
Yeah.
It was made up. And as much as I tried to get fancy, even with my lead score, I got pretty experimental. I had some analytics guys where we were able to up that rate, but nothing, as much as we tried, nothing substantial. The tools weren't there. So suddenly in the lead scoring stuff, that becomes a really big deal. So, with specific lead scoring with the deal structure, that becomes very, very important to who you assign the rep to. Okay. What stage it's at. And so that becomes a very, very important metric, because if I asked folks, a couple of years ago, hey, with lead scoring, we talked about the predictability of the outcome. No, it wasn't there. So lead scoring was one area. Okay. So now let's pick on the cousin of lead scoring, intent data. All right. Okay. Just because Joe Schmo, downloads your white paper from said third party and you get the contact information, is that intent? Maybe a little bit of intent. I don't want to be too much of a jerk, but where did that intent fall? What else are we doing? What do we know, and how can we nurture that? So suddenly, with AI, intent isn't based on one data point. Right. We can look at all. So the great AI systems, who is this person? What's their company? What do we know about them? Yeah. Have we seen anything else? And you start correlating all these other things. Have we dealt with them before? Who are their competitors? Blah, blah, blah. So suddenly we can take intent data, which is going to be changing, continually based on behavior, and we can do some magic with it. So the big ones, are lead scoring, intent data. But clearly, a lot of the previous metrics still matter. Okay, we're getting what are our conversion rates, sales velocity, because when we look at the impact of AI, and once it gets through the systems on the BDR side, what's going to happen is our forecasting getting better, damn well better. Okay, our forecasting, we're looking at our conversion rates improving. What about our sales force velocity? What about the time that reps are spending? There's a lot of time that reps spend on crappy deals. Yeah. So again, with great intent data or great lead scoring, suddenly they can focus the intent. So it's a combination of some of the newer metrics that have gotten better and how they impact the follow-on metrics.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always sort of thought that lead scoring was it was manufactured from the marketing automation folks to help the marketing team win the "You're sending me bad leads. No, you're not sending me good leads. I'm upset." The lead fight that's going on for years, right? I sort of thought it was just to try to make the marketing team have a thing like, "No, see, it scored really high." Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why
It,
you couldn't close it.
and,
Like,
and and the good marketers would actually work with this. And I've been on both sides. I've been on both the sales side, the marketing side, trying to figure out which side I want to take to address your point. Maybe both. So the good marketing folks would sit down with the sales leadership to map out
Yeah.
the scoring. Of course, when the scoring didn't result in deals, the sales leader claimed no knowledge. No knowledge
Exactly.
of scoring. Oh, I don't recall that conversation.
No,
You
when did
know,
we do that?
so you had that going on, and then with the marketers, again, did they? A lot of it is based on what we talked about earlier. It's based on assumptions on
Mm,
the journey.
yeah.
At this stage, they'd be downloading this. I'm going to give them this score. We'll play at that, and go in that direction. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's what we're faced with.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. As I think about the salesperson though, like focusing on the salesperson, not the management for a minute, what do you think as we go into, this explosion of AI tools across sales and sales ops and management too, I guess. What do you think salespeople today need to learn from a skill set perspective? What's different for them now and going forward?
Okay,
And what should they focus on?
so let's talk about. There's a question before that I want to ask is
Um,
you have to be before we can tell them what to do. They have to be receptive to change.
Yeah.
And I have a bad quote that basically says nobody over the age of 8 changes. So, but the person has to be receptive, and there's a lot of pushback. And in what I'm seeing right now, when it comes to the application of AI, some people are pushing back, saying this is going to take my job, which is just stupid.
Yeah.
It's going to make your job better, and it's going to force other things that I don't want to do. It's a change thing. I don't want to change my systems, and they're not seeing it the right way. So to answer your question, let's assume that they're receptive to change. Again, this is also a sales leadership issue, but the
Yeah.
people have to be receptive. Um, be receptive to change. So from an enablement perspective, and I don't think enablement gets the respect it deserves, or maybe it does because a lot of enablement sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. And where I've done sales turnarounds or where I've run even with channels, great enablement,
Mm,
great enablement is a superpower.
yeah.
Okay. And I just think, and sometimes we kind of push sales enablement to the either to the SKO, the sales kickoff, or the annual kickoff. Yeah, let's have it in Vegas. Why not? Okay, and everybody's half in the bag and everybody's hung over. Enablement, it just has to be not, nonstop. So enablement becomes a big piece here. And make enablement so it doesn't suck. Make it fun. Make it interesting. Don't make it stupid. Make it relevant. So with the enablement, what we have to do with our sales teams is they have to become a little bit more data savvy and a
Mm,
little bit more, there's data savvy and tech savvy, because even though we automate things, they're going to be using these tools. And ultimately, the shape of the sales force is going to, the future sales force is going to have to be more tech savvy, whether
mm,
we like it or not. And I honestly believe everybody can be tech savvy. Okay.
mm,
I don't think it's a human limitation that's like, oh, I can't get this tech stuff. It's not like you're going to need a PhD in astrophysics, but
no.
I think the data element is going to be critically important. I think the tech element is going to be critically important. So, but this is important. It doesn't, you can't throw out the mastery of the skills. Okay.
Mm,
So let's think about golf for a minute. All right. So we all know the dudes that have the really, really expensive golf clubs. That's like the new AI systems.
Yep.
Okay. And yeah, I shouldn't admit this publicly. We were at a course down in Atlanta many years ago. I was actually with a bunch of lawyers. And in Atlanta, they put all the houses like right on the course. So this guy had this incredibly expensive set of clubs. He took out the driver and sliced the golf ball right through a 2-story picture window. And the look on their faces, they ended up saying, I said, okay, guys, you're lawyers. What do we do? He said, we get the hell out of here.
Run.
But it was really weird because when the ball went through, it was kind of like slow motion. The window didn't collapse right away. And then it came down like in slow motion. But the point is, these systems, you can have the best clubs in the world, but the ones who are going to actually get the most out of the best clubs are the folks that have the mastery. You have to master the basics, and you have to recognize, I have to understand my product. Okay. AI may help train you on your product.
Yep.
But you've got to understand your product. You got to understand your prospect. You've got to understand the dynamics of the industry and how all comes together. So we have to maintain a balance between mastery of our craft and mastery of our tools. And just, that's why the golf analogy is spot on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so when you think about this though, I can see, going through change, resistance to change, helping people go through that makes a lot of sense. But what about the organization itself? I mean, do you think these tools have an impact on how you want to structure inside sales, outside sales, or do we call it outside sales? Anyway, how does it have some effect on structure? I mean, how would you say things should change to take advantage of this?
It's surprisingly, when I speak with companies that have, they have perceived problems. And remember, missing your number isn't a problem. And before listeners throw rocks at me, let me explain. Missing your number is a symptom of a problem. And I know of too many A-grade chief revenue officers who've gotten fired for missing their number. When you go back and analyze, this is one of the things that, from the Business Catalytics perspective, what we end up doing is, let's find out before you shoot the CMO or the CRO or whatever, let's find out what's going on. So with that being the case, suddenly we have insight, okay, what are we missing here? And what the tool's going to give us, it's like, well, you've got a lot, this part of the organization, maybe inside, didn't deliver, the results that we expected. And okay, do we have an inside problem? Then we have to look at marketing. Did inside not necessarily have the tools that they needed? Oh, and then you have to take a look at, this is inbound or outbound. Is that just a fluke based on where we were in time, or is that actually the thing? So the tools, to answer your question, can help us determine the structure of an organization. The tools can make some recommendations that people may not have considered before. And the thing that all of us, the good and the not so good, is whether we like it or not, we all have biases. Well, this is how the organization is structured. So this is how I've always done it, Michael. Thank you for your feedback, but have a nice day. No, it's like, yeah, we may want to consider this. And where I've seen sales, I saw one sales organization whose chief revenue officer absolutely refused to do inside sales. He wanted all his direct reps to do prospecting. They hated it. And, the organization basically hit the skids. And when we analyzed it, and this is the early days of some of the tools. It's like, what you're missing is you're missing your entire top of funnel because of your bias, and you're putting the wrong stuff there. So the tools aren't going to restructure our organization. It's going to give us insight into how our organization, not only how our organization could potentially be structured, giving you the insights to make that decision, but as time goes on, to determine whether you have to make in-course adjustments.
Mm. I we talked a little bit earlier about sales and sales ops, right? And I know, obviously there's some great impact from some of these tools in the sales ops team. And I assume that, that's making shifts in the relationship between the sales team and the sales ops folks. So I'm curious how does AI become more integrated in that workflow? And then let's talk about the other end of it too. So you've got sales ops, sales, and then you've got customer success. So how does that all kind of tie together in this world with AI?
No, exactly. It's if we're going to proselytize, who better than the sales ops team? Okay, as much as we said earlier, they've been doing the more mundane work. Most of the sales professionals have deep regard for their sales ops team. Like, this is the one area it covers. You know, the sales ops team. Growing up in Boston, there's a lot of churches, and sometimes the sales ops team is like the priest. Okay, you can go in there and ask for forgiveness, and he'll absolve your sins because you totally screwed up your forecast, your pipeline, everything else. So your sales guy's going to absolve you of your sins. Not only absolve you of your sins, but also fix them. And sales ops suddenly, and they're also very. I found the sales ops professionals that I've worked with over the past 20 years or so to be incredibly. They're curious. The good ones. They're curious. They do a lot of experimenting. And so they're just a terrific point for a lot of the
Mhm.
initial AI testing, and they can start working with the sales team. So sometimes, we talked about the top down, the sales leaders driving it, and this is
Mm.
what you should be doing. Yeah, that's important. That's critical. But the bottom up from sales ops professionals becomes really, really key.
Mm.
And as much as we want to say, oh, these tools are going to give you terrific insights, the reality is it may be the sales ops person that's garnering the insights
Mm.
from your sales activity, and that shouldn't be dismissed. That's
Right.
going to be very, very critical how folks do. So, what does the sales ops person need to do? They're going to see things because they're looking at so many patterns. They're going to see stuff they're going to recognize, at least at this stage. So, early on, sales ops is critically important. And my warning to people running sales ops teams, if you keep your sales ops professionals
Mm.
just doing mundane CRM entry, taking the forecast, taking some of the numbers, dumping it into a spreadsheet because the CEO doesn't like the Salesforce forecast and all that other shit. The reality is, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Right.
Give them the wherewithal to also start experimenting, and suddenly you may end up with a much better forecast that the CEO and the CFO and everybody else is all excited about. So that's going to be on sort of the sales
Mm.
to basically sales ops side. You also asked about CS, okay, which could be
Mhm.
customer service or customer success.
Right.
We tend to conflate them, so let me deconflate them. Um, the customer success impacts an organization. It impacts brand because at the end of the day, a lot of customer support. A lot of customer support just sucks. So what have organizations done? They got their knowledge base of crap and they basically put a search engine in front of it. Or maybe over the past few years, they put a chatbot in front of it.
A co-pilot, yes.
Yeah. So, I ran into this the other day with some of we got some pretty complex systems doing all this
Mhm.
diagnostic on companies, and one thing wasn't working, and it's like it's giving me help pages from 7 years ago. It's not even relevant. So we really have to turn around, on the customer support side and get it really intelligent. And what's critically important, and some organizations are doing this well, go back and mind, go back and mine,
Mhm.
customer support logs and everything else. And this is important as well to actually feed back into the sales team and sales systems. These are some of the issues because suddenly, a
Yeah.
customer support issue, let me refactor that for a minute, is a prime sales objection.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all suddenly, if you're addressing it, you know how to counter it. it's going to be there. So with Support Mastered, I think we're going to see major strides over the next 2 years in customer support. Then there's the customer success piece. Okay. And I think organizations, I don't know what the definition of customer success is anymore. Okay. Oh, it's the dude who's preventing churn and doing the upsell. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that really what it is? I mean, great customer success is recognizing things. And let's face it, the customer success guy will get shot if there's high churn. Okay.
Right.
But what if there's high churn because the product sucks?
Yeah.
Okay. And stuff happens. I was talking to somebody the other day. For those of you following Sonos, these wireless. Michael, do you have Sonos speakers?
I do. And that app just terrible, isn't it?
we all get bricked last year.
I know.
So
I know.
What's going on? And so a lot of executives, lost their heads. It's like, okay, you bricked the product. All right. So, but the important part is, your customer success team has to know they need product insights, and that's beyond the scope of this call, but product insights are critically important to customer success as well as sales, as well as marketing. But the customer success team, they also, the great customer success folks I know historically have been very hands-on. They know the deals and the customers love them. A buddy of mine, I called him Mr. Zero Churn. Okay. He just, there was no churn, but he burned out. Okay. It doesn't scale. So suddenly we're seeing new tools emerge. I think Pecan's one of them that can give us insight into, is there potential for churn here? And how does this relate to sales in a big way? Because suddenly, if one of your competitors sees, okay, there was a churn based on this and it went to this particular organization, that's going to be replicated. The market's very, very efficient. Okay. So if you're bleeding, okay, there's going to be more than enough people to help you bleed more. So that's going to be key. We need the tools for that. So ultimately, customer success is tied to sales success. And one final area which falls into the gray is customer success responsible for upselling. And I don't know, this is a religious war. So I'm gonna stay out of religious wars. It could be. It depends on the structure of your organization. You may want to ask your AI systems, for some models. But in the event, at least the customer success people, regardless of doing the upsell or not, they have to recognize and look at the behavior to recognize, is there an upsell opportunity? Okay. And what would it be? And have there been similar upsell journeys? The journey doesn't end at the bottom of the funnel. The journey continues, for infinity.
Yeah, I think what you said in there that I particularly like is, as I think about this, it's not company success, it's customer success for a reason, right? And if you lose sight of where that priority is, then the function's not effective.
Yeah. And like we said earlier, customer churn isn't a problem. It's a symptom. And until we understand that, let's stop solving symptoms. Let's start solving problems, which is my day job.
No, that's fair. Well, so if we think about, pull out our crystal ball for a minute. If we think about where this is going, right? Say 3 to 5 years out, what do you think from a sales process perspective, what's going to remain with the human salesperson and what's going to shift to the agentic salesperson?
Okay. Great question. I'm going to answer. Am I allowed to answer both positively
Absolutely.
and negatively?
I think that makes sense.
All right. I'm trying to be respectful. So from the positive side, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, these systems we're figuring out how to implement this. Which one should we implement? Do they even integrate? And if there's an underlying theme throughout everything today we talked about data. Okay. The stuff has to integrate. Okay. And that's the other thing, our tech stacks, whether it's from our tech stack, our sales ops tech stack, you name it, they're a mess. The stuff has to integrate cleanly, and that's hard. So over the next 3 to 5 years, you will see better integration points. We'll see better best practices because we're still figuring, whether we want to admit it or not, we're still figuring it out. And some of the early people that have the requisite staff to go and do things are going to be ahead. My biggest fear is that, in the present, a lot of organizations are going to be like, oh, the CEO said, go do AI. So they're going to go down the AI path and screw something up. But the next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll see better reporting, more integration from the tools, and don't be surprised if the tools help integrate themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's powerful.
Yep.
But still, the saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool. Okay. Yeah. Even if the tools are integrating themselves, we have to understand the underlying principles of what the tools are doing. Right. We just can't take it. We just can't take it willy-nilly. So I think we'll see better use of the tools. Now, with respect to what does the human stuff look like later on? I think what we described earlier, the more complex, high-touch sale that requires, somebody to look at multiple factors, understand the dynamics. What we'll see is that's going to stay in place, but the person using that, he or she is going to they'll be leveraging AI tools, heavily to do all that. But there's also, that's kind of on the positive side. So I think, again, this is, as we spoke at the beginning, this is a great time because we've been doing all these micro efficiencies and suddenly we're going to see phenomenal efficiencies. But if I were to predict, I think things will plateau. And here's the negative side. All great companies are going to go for that efficiency and get the operational efficiency, the sales efficiency, the marketing efficiency. But at the end of the day, let's not forget, it's all. And I got a couple of books here, and I keep them on my desk. Okay, they're at the end of the day, it's your brand.
Yeah.
Okay, it's your brand, it's your product, and everything else. And so, although tools initially may help you beat a better competitor, somebody with a better solution, but when everybody kind of levels off and they've got the efficiency, it's the product, it's the innovation, it's the customer experience within the product. Yeah. That's what's going to matter. So as we get really efficient over the next couple of years, efficiency and all this AI stuff is great, but it's not a substitute for a lousy product.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe it helps us conceptually design a better product up front or something. I don't know. Well,
and where will we get those insights? Let's look at the sales logs. Let's see what people are asking.
Maybe from the customers. That seems like a good place.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's a virtuous cycle, or like I said. But my fear, like everything else, we've seen over the past couple of years, we got marketing automation systems. So we basically get pummeled with, follow-on emails and all this other crap. So marketing automation is getting more intelligent with AI systems. So everything that we had static is going to be there. We've kind of overdone some of the inside calling. What's going to be more effective? Can we not call until people actually want to take our call versus, calling and, the it thing a few years ago, it's like, well, people respond to text, so we're going to text them to death. In fact, the Wall Street Journal this morning had an article about people getting second numbers because they're so sick of this texting. And go get a second number, and then you could always change the second number and always preserve your main number. Don't ever give it away.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fair. And I do have to say that my email agent is getting much better at putting all of that spam that comes in the right place. So, well, that's all the time we have today, Rob. But one of the things I always like to do at the end of the broadcast is to get a recommendation. So, could you share an author, a thought leader, somebody that you think would be relevant for the audience that they should check out?
Oh, absolutely. I think the good part about living in interesting times, and we have interesting times all around, is that we have access to so many great thought leaders. Paul Reitzer who does the Marketing AI Institute. And the Marketing AI Institute isn't just for marketing folks. Salespeople that are listening in, go see that. We also, some of the classical ones that have adapted, Matt Dixon, Brett Adamson, the whole Challenger SEAL team. I had them on one of my webinars last year. And they're also recognizing what the role is. So traditional people that recognize the importance of the sales process are suddenly well positioned. And we also had Tiffany Bova on several years ago, and I love Tiffany. She turned around and she's also adapting. I mean, she's her depth of Salesforce knowledge is unparalleled, but she's also doing great stuff. And some have new books out, some don't. Always take a look at either their Substacks or their blogs. If they're posting on LinkedIn, it's a great start. But there's a lot I could go on for hours. There's so many great people out there, but don't get too caught up. AI may give you more time. Okay. And maybe it's going to give you more time.
Maybe I get to read a lot more then. That's good. Yeah.
You still have to keep your job.
No, that's great. Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate it. And thanks so much for joining today. Really, really fun conversation.
Thank you, Michael. And Michael, thank you for what you're doing for this community. With all the stuff going on right now, somebody has to distill, all this AI barley into scotch. So thank you for
that. That is what I'm hoping to do anyway. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the show. So thanks, Rob. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.